Episode 13. The year was 1989. The Soviet Union was crumbling, but its grip on Afghanistan remained strong enough to redirect my life without my consent. One moment I was a passionate music student in Kiev, with dreams of composing melodies that would touch souls across continents. The next, I was standing in a drab military uniform in Lviv, being taught how to operate a tank instead of a piano. This is the story of how I, Wahid Omid, went from composing sonatas to being forced into military strategy, and how music remained my silent rebellion in a world that tried to transform artists into soldiers. If you enjoy tales of artistic resistance against authoritarian regimes, keep reading. If not, the KGB would like to know your location anyway. Just kidding. But seriously, keep reading. This story has music, drama, and a daring airport escape that would make even James Bond nervously adjust his tie. The cold Ukrainian wind bit through my civilian clothes as I stood outside the Lviv Military Political Academy, clutching my suitcase with white knuckles. It was the winter of 1989, and I, along with several other Afghan students, had been forcibly transferred from our universities across the Soviet Union to this imposing concrete structure. Our crime? Being Afghan students during a time when our government had pledged allegiance to Soviet ideologies. "Hand over your belongings," barked a stern-faced officer, his Russian accent thick as the snow accumulating on my shoulders. "From today, you are military cadets of the Soviet-Afghan Cooperation Program." My stomach churned as they confiscated my cassette tapes, my handwritten music sheets, and even my small keyboard items I had carefully packed from Kiev's prestigious music academy. In exchange, I received a stiff, olive-green uniform that smelled of mothballs and submission. "But I am a musician," I protested weakly, knowing it was futile. I was studying at the conservatory. The officer looked at me with eyes devoid of sympathy. "Now you will learn to fight for your country's revolution. Music will not defeat the Mujahideen." That night, as I lay on the hard military-issue bed, surrounded by other shell-shocked Afghan students, I realized that my dream of becoming a renowned composer had been replaced by the Soviet Union's dream of turning me into a military officer who would return to Afghanistan and train others to fight their war. The days blurred into a monotonous nightmare of military drills, political indoctrination, and weapons training. Every morning began with the harsh blare of a bugle at 5 a.m., followed by rigorous physical training in the biting Ukrainian cold. My fingers, once calloused from hours of piano practice, now developed new calluses from assembling and disassembling Kalashnikov rifles. "Faster, Omid!" the drill sergeant would shout as I fumbled with the weapon parts. Your enemies will not wait while you contemplate which piece goes where, like some musical composition. The irony was not lost on me. The very precision and patience I had cultivated as a musician was now considered a liability in this new world of military efficiency. The Academy's curriculum was a strange amalgamation of military strategy, Marxist-Leninist philosophy, and practical combat training. They taught us how to operate Soviet T-62 tanks, a skill as far removed from my musical aspirations as Earth is from Mars. The heavy metal machine, with its thunderous engine and deadly capability, was the antithesis of the delicate instruments I had dedicated my life to mastering. "Feel the power," enthused our tank instructor, a burly Ukrainian with a passion for armored vehicles that matched my former passion for Tchaikovsky. "This is true strength, not the soft melodies you played before." But even as my body went through the motions of military training, my mind composed symphonies. During tactical lectures, I would imagine harmonies that could express the absurdity of my situation. While marching in formation, I would mentally arrange the rhythmic footfalls into complex time signatures. It was my silent rebellion, a way to preserve the musician within the soldier they were forcing me to become. There were others like me among the Afghan contingent, former medical students, engineers, linguists, all ripped from their studies and thrust into this military mold. During rare moments of privacy, we would share our stories and dreams, finding solace in our shared displacement. I was 2 months away from defending my dissertation on cardiovascular surgery, lamented Farid, a medical student from Odessa. Now they want me to learn how to efficiently damage the very organs I wanted to heal. Ahmad, a former literature student, would recite Persian poetry in hushed tones after lights out, the ancient verses a balm to our wounded spirits. We formed a brotherhood of the displaced, united by our common desire to reclaim our chosen paths. The Soviet officers noticed my continued resistance to their indoctrination. While I performed the required tasks, there was a detachment they could sense, a part of me they could not reach or convert. One particularly harsh winter day, after I had questioned the necessity of learning attack formations, I was summoned to the commandant's office. Colonel Petrov, a man whose face seemed permanently frozen in a scowl, sat behind his massive desk, a file open before him. "Cadet Omid," he began, his voice like gravel, "your instructors report that you continue to show reluctance in embracing your military education." I stood at attention, as was required, but maintained eye contact, a small defiance. "Your file from Kiev speaks of your talent," he continued, surprising me. "Your professors believed you had the potential for international recognition." A flicker of hope ignited within me. Perhaps he understood. Perhaps there had been a mistake. "Such a waste," he concluded, crushing that nascent hope. "But talents must sometimes be redirected for the greater good. The revolution requires soldiers, not symphonies." What followed was what they euphemistically called special political education. 3 days of isolation in a Spartan room, with recordings of speeches by Soviet leaders, playing at all hours, interrupted only by interrogation. Sessions about my loyalty to the Afghan-Soviet alliance. Those 3 days were among the darkest of my life. I emerged physically exhausted and emotionally drained, but with my inner resistance intact, though I had learned to better conceal it. I realized that open defiance would only lead to more education, or worse, reports sent back to Kabul that could endanger my family. So I adopted a new strategy: outward compliance while preserving my inner musical world. I excelled in the physical aspects of training, demonstrated appropriate revolutionary zeal during political discussions, and even volunteered for extra duties to demonstrate my commitment. A remarkable transformation. I overheard one instructor tell another, "Perhaps we've finally broken through to this one." Little did they know that beneath my convincing performance lay heart still beating to the rhythm of Chopin's nocturnes, not the cadence of military marche. The 3-month accelerated officer training program mercifully drew to a close. We had been molded, however reluctantly, into what the Soviet-Afghan alliance needed: politically indoctrinated junior officers ready to return to Afghanistan and serve the revolution. On our final day, we received our certification and, most importantly, the return of our personal documents. Holding my passport again felt like reclaiming a piece of my identity, even if it now contained a new stamp marking me as a graduate of the Lviv Military Political Academy. "You will serve with distinction," the commandant addressed us during the graduation ceremony. "You will bring the lessons of socialism and military discipline back to your homeland. You will help defeat the enemies of progress." As we boarded the enormous Antonov military transport plane bound for Kabul, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief at leaving the academy behind, dread at what awaited me in Afghanistan, and underneath it all, a simmering determination to somehow find my way back to music. The massive aircraft lumbered into the sky, carrying us across Soviet territories and finally into Afghan airspace. Looking out the small window at the Hindu Kush Mountains emerging through the clouds, I wondered if I would ever sit before a piano again, or if my hands were now destined only for weapons. What awaited us at Kabul International Airport was precisely what I had feared: a military reception committee ready to dispatch us to various combat units across the country. As we descended the aircraft stairs, I could see the olive green military trucks lined up on the tarmac, engines idling, ready to transport us to our next phase of service. Group A to the Eastern Front, Group B to Kandahar, Group C to Herat. An officer with a clipboard called out names and assignments. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the crowd, searching for any familiar face, any potential escape from the military future that seemed inevitable. And then, amidst the chaos and noise of the airport, a miracle occurred. "Lieutenant Omid?" A crisp voice called from my left. I turned to find a junior officer I didn't recognize. "Yes?" "Come with me, please." Special assignment. Confused but hopeful, I followed him away from the main group, through a side entrance of the terminal and out into the blinding Kabul sunshine. There, parked discreetly away from the military convoy, was a civilian car with military plates. And in the back seat, smiling broadly, sat my uncle Rahmatullah Omid, one of the highest-ranking officers in the Afghan army, and more importantly at that moment, my salvation. "Uncle!" I exclaimed, barely containing my emotion as I entered the vehicle. "Not here," he cautioned, though his eyes conveyed his affection. "We'll talk when we're away from the airport." "Yes?" As the car pulled away, leaving behind the military trucks and my fellow graduates, I felt the first genuine sense of hope since being sent to Lviv. Whatever happened next, I had been granted a reprieve, a chance to reclaim some portion of the life I had been forced to abandon. What I didn't know then, couldn't have known, was that this moment of rescue would lead me not back to a conservatory, but to a different kind of musical journey, one intertwined with politics, cultural revolution, and eventually a heartbreaking choice between my homeland and my freedom. But that afternoon, as Kabul's familiar streets replaced the grim corridors of the Lviv Military Academy, all I felt was gratitude. My uncle had pulled strings, called in favors, and risked his own standing to divert me from the front lines. "Where are we going?" I finally asked as we drove through Kabul's busy streets. My uncle's answer would set the course for the next chapter of my life, one where music and military service would collide in ways I could never have imagined. "To meet your new ensemble," he replied cryptically. "The Lola Ho." Sometimes life's most profound transformations occur, not through grand decisions, but through a series of small surrenders and unexpected rescues. After escaping the fate of frontline military service, I found myself in a curious limbo, still a soldier in uniform, but with a guitar rather than a gun in my hands. This is how music became both my sanctuary and my ultimate path to freedom. Breaking news. This chapter contains unauthorized dancing, revolutionary music, and a presidential music critique. The Ministry of Culture warns that reading further may cause spontaneous toe-tapping and dangerous thoughts about artistic freedom. Proceed at your own risk. Your Coca-Cola consumption may also increase dramatically. "To meet your new ensemble," my uncle had said cryptically as we drove away from Kabul International Airport. The Lola Ho. The name meant nothing to me then. Little did I know it would soon become my identity, my salvation, and eventually my passport to a new life. My uncle Rahmatullah Omid, a high-ranking officer with connections throughout the Afghan military establishment, had orchestrated what seemed impossible: my reassignment from combat duty to the Afghan Secret Service's Cultural Division, specifically to their official music ensemble. "You will still serve," he explained as we navigated Kabul's crowded streets, "but with your talent, not your trigger finger." The military vehicle turned into a compound on the outskirts of Kabul, surrounded by high walls and guarded by soldiers. A strange place for artistic pursuits, I thought, but this was Afghanistan. In 1989, everything existed within the shadow of conflict. "Most of these musicians were like you," my uncle said, as we walked toward a building from which faint musical sounds emerged. "Educated in the Soviet Union, trained in Western and traditional techniques, and too valuable to waste on the battlefield." Inside, I discovered a fully equipped rehearsal space with instruments that would have been impressive even in Moscow or Kiev. 5 men paused their playing as we entered, standing at attention when they recognized my uncle's rank. "At ease," he said casually. "I've brought you your new keyboard player and vocalist, my nephew, Lieutenant Wahid Omid." Their faces registered surprise, followed by cautious curiosity. I later learned that they had been told to expect a Russian specialist, not a young Afghan who looked as uncomfortable in his military uniform as they once had in theirs. After my uncle left with promises to handle the remaining paperwork for my transfer, the band's leader approached me. He was an older man with kind eyes that seemed at odds with his military bearing. "I am Wais Kabiri," he said, extending his hand. "Manager of Lola Ho. What conservatory did they drag you from?" "Kiev," I replied, still overwhelmed by this sudden change in my circumstances. He nodded appreciatively. "Good school." He gestured vaguely at the uniform he wore. That night, I learned about Lola Ho's unique position in Afghanistan's cultural landscape. Officially, they were a propaganda ensemble, creating music that celebrated the revolution and the Soviet-Afghan friendship. Unofficially, they were pushing the boundaries of what was possible in Afghan music, incorporating elements of Western rock, jazz, and classical composition that resonated with Kabul's youth. "We walk a fine line," Wais explained over dinner in the compound's mess hall. "Create music revolutionary enough to satisfy our military superiors, but innovative enough to actually reach the people. My first weeks with Lola Ho were a crash course in musical diplomacy. By day, we rehearsed patriotic anthems and revolutionary songs for official functions. By night, we experimented with fusion compositions that blended traditional Afghan melodies with Western harmonies and instrumentation. I introduced the techniques I had studied in Kiev: complex chord progressions, alternative scales, improvisation structures, while they taught me the nuances of Afghan folk music that my classical education had overlooked. It was the first time since being forced into military service that I felt truly alive again. Our first performance for national television was scheduled for the Afghan New Year celebration. The pressure was immense, not just to perform well, but to navigate the political expectations while still creating something authentically moving. "Remember," Wais cautioned during our final rehearsal, "innovation is permitted only within the framework of revolutionary values." What we presented that night was a carefully calibrated balance. Traditional instruments like the rubab and tabla playing alongside electric guitars and synthesizers. Folk melodies subtly harmonized with jazz-influenced progressions and lyrics that spoke of national unity while avoiding overt political messaging. The response was electric. The studio audience, mostly party officials and their families, seemed stunned into silence before erupting into applause. The switchboards at the television station reportedly lit up with calls from viewers across Kabul. "You've created something dangerous," my uncle told me the next day, though his proud smile belied his words. "Revolutionary music for a revolutionary time," I replied, echoing the official line. He laughed. "Just be careful. Art that moves people has a way of moving in unexpected directions." How right he was. Within weeks, our ensemble became unexpectedly popular among Kabul's youth. Our military superiors were pleased with the positive propaganda value, but seemed oblivious to how our music was creating spaces for expression beyond official ideologies. The Afghan Youth Democratic Organization, recognizing the potential of our approach, awarded me their highest medal for cultural contribution, a surreal honor for someone who had been forcibly drafted into military service just months earlier. With this recognition came an even more unexpected development, an invitation to have a meeting with President Najibullah himself at the presidential palace. The palace meeting was to be part of a cultural art and music featuring Afghanistan's revolutionary artists. The presidential palace, with its blend of modern and traditional Afghan architecture, was a far cry from the utilitarian military academy in Lviv. President Najibullah entered the hall to formal announcement, his powerful presence immediately commanding attention. Unlike the stern Soviet commanders I had encountered, he carried himself with a scholarly dignity befitting his doctorate and reputation for intellectual depth. Throughout, I watched the president's face for any reaction, any sign of disapproval, but his expression remained thoughtfully engaged. President Najibullah, after finished his speech about art and music and its benefit in Afghan culture, certainly he looked at me and said, "Wahid Omid," he said, surprising me with his knowledge of my name. "I am quite familiar with your music and performances on national television." My heart raced, uncertain if this was praise or prelude to criticism. "You are bringing a new flavor to our music and culture," he continued, his voice measured and thoughtful. "This is valuable, but remember something important about our society." I listened intently, aware of the rare opportunity to hear directly from the nation's leader. The Afghan people need time to digest new flavors. You are taking very big steps right now. Try to move more slowly, and I promise everything will be all right. It wasn't a rebuke, but rather sincere advice from someone who understood the delicate balance between progress and tradition in Afghan society. His words stayed with me, a reminder that even revolutionary art required careful consideration of its audience. "Thank you, Mr. President," I replied, genuinely moved by his thoughtful engagement with our work. "I will remember your wisdom." This encounter transformed my approach to musical innovation in Afghanistan. Rather than pushing boundaries for the sake of being revolutionary, I began thinking more deeply about how to create meaningful evolution that could be embraced rather than rejected. It was this new perspective that led to my next Project One that would further blur the lines between my military service and artistic expression. After performing on the popular television quiz show, Mosabe Kai Zeni, at the Russian Cultural Center in Kabul, I was struck by the potential of the venue. Its modern facilities sat mostly unused, except for official functions and Soviet film screenings. What if, I proposed to my band manager the following day, we created a disco club for Kabul's youth? Live music every weekend, a place where young people could experience music as a unifying force. Weiss initially laughed at the audacity of the suggestion. A disco? In Kabul? Under a government that still needs to prove its Islamic credentials while maintaining Soviet allyship? Not a Western-style disco, I clarified. A cultural youth center with music and dancing, but respectful of our values. No alcohol, just music and community. To my surprise, Weiss didn't dismiss the idea outright. The Russian Cultural Center might agree. They're always looking for ways to demonstrate cultural cooperation. What followed was weeks of navigating bureaucratic mazes, securing permissions from military authorities, cultural ministries, and security services. My status as a decorated youth leader and military officer paradoxically opened doors that would have remained firmly closed to a civilian artist. The night we opened the Youth Cultural Music Center, the official name we gave our disco to make it politically acceptable, I stood backstage feeling a strange mixture of pride and disbelief. Outside, a line of young Afghans waited eagerly, dressed in their best outfits that blended traditional elements with carefully curated Western touches. Remember, I told our ensemble before we took the stage, tonight we're not just playing music. We're creating a new space for our generation. The evening exceeded all expectations. Hundreds of young Kabulis filled the venue, tentatively at first, but with growing enthusiasm as our music gave them permission to dance, to express, to momentarily escape the weight of a country at war. As predicted, no one missed the alcohol Coca-Cola, and Fanta flowed freely, becoming the unlikely beverages of Kabul's cultural awakening. Week after week, our cultural center grew in popularity. Young people from across Kabul's diverse neighborhoods found common ground on our dance floor. University students mingled with young officers, the children of government officials, alongside those from ordinary families. Music was achieving what political speeches could not: a genuine sense of unity and shared experience. You've accomplished another mission. Waze told me one evening as we watched the crowd from behind the sound booth, though I'm not sure it's the mission our superiors had in mind. I laughed, but his words carried a warning I couldn't ignore. Our success was drawing attention, and not all of it welcome. The summons came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Wace appeared at my quarters with an unusually serious expression. General Khan wants to see us both in his office. Today, the name sent a chill through me. General Khan was a senior figure in the Afghan Secret Service, known for his hardline approach and deep connections to Soviet intelligence. The Secret Service headquarters was an imposing concrete structure in central Kabul, its brutalist architecture a physical manifestation of its intimidating purpose. After passing through multiple security checkpoints, we were escorted directly to the general's office on the top floor. General Khan was not what I had expected. Rather than the stereotypical intelligence officer, thin and calculating, he was barrel-chested and muscular, projecting physical rather than intellectual intimidation. Behind his marble desk, he examined us with cold efficiency. "Lieutenant Omid," he began without preamble, "your reputation precedes you. The musician soldier who has captured Kabul's imagination." I remained silent, knowing no response was expected. "Your work with Lola Ho has been noted positively by our cultural attaches," he continued, "which is why you've been selected for an important assignment." He outlined a plan that made my blood run cold. Our ensemble, along with the group Gul Sirk and several prominent Afghan singers, would represent Afghanistan at an international festival in Ankara, Turkey. On the surface, a prestigious cultural exchange. The reality, as the general explained, was more complex. "Turkey is a NATO country, heavily westernized," he said, his voice hardening. "There is significant risk of defection among artists. You, as a military officer within the delegation, will have additional responsibilities." Those responsibilities became horrifyingly clear. I was to monitor my fellow musicians, report on their conversations, identify any who might be considering defection, and liaise with the cultural attaches, a thin disguise for intelligence officers who would accompany the delegation. "You should be grateful," the general concluded, leaning forward. "You serve your military obligation in concert halls while your peers face the mujahideen in mountain passes. Remember that when you consider your loyalty." Walking out of the headquarters, Wace and I maintained silence until we were well away from any possible surveillance. "What will you do?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What can I do?" I responded, the weight of my situation pressing down like a physical force. "I'm a soldier. I have orders." But that night, alone in my quarters, I faced the most profound moral crisis of my life. To betray my fellow artists, people who had accepted me and shared their creative spirits, was unthinkable. Yet to refuse a direct order would endanger not just my career, but potentially my life and the safety of my family. As I packed for the journey to Turkey in the following days, a third option gradually crystallized in my mind, one I hardly dared acknowledge even to myself. Turkey bordered Europe. It was a NATO country with Western connections. If I were to leave the delegation, the thought terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. To abandon my homeland, my family, everything I had known, was almost unimaginable. Yet to return to Afghanistan meant either betraying my principles or facing the consequences of refusal. Our departure day arrived with ceremonial fanfare. The cultural delegation gathered at Kabul International Airport, the same place where months earlier I had been rescued from frontline service. Official photographs were taken, patriotic speeches delivered, and we boarded the international flight to Ankara. Throughout the journey, I maintained the expected demeanor of a dedicated officer, making mental notes of which delegation members I had been specifically instructed to watch. Among them were several artists known for their Western leanings or previous expressions of political dissent, carefully balanced within the delegation to present an image of artistic freedom. Ankara greeted us with spring sunshine and the disorienting experience of being in a Muslim country that embraced secular modernity. The festival organizers welcomed us warmly, assigning us accommodations in a hotel that seemed luxuriously apolitical after years in Afghanistan's ideologically saturated environments. For the first days of the festival, I performed my dual roles musician on stage, observer off it with growing inner turmoil. The freedom evident in the Turkish cultural scene, the casual international exchanges happening around us, and the absence of constant ideological scrutiny made the prospect of return increasingly difficult to contemplate. Our performances were well received, our unique fusion of traditional Afghan music with modern elements finding appreciative audiences among the international gathering. On stage, I could momentarily forget the impossible choice looming before me. On the third night, after a particularly successful concert, several members of our delegation were invited to an informal gathering hosted by Turkish musicians. I accompanied them, ostensibly to participate, but actually to observe as ordered. The gathering was everything the general had feared: free-flowing conversation about art, politics, and the situation in Afghanistan, with several Western cultural attaches present. As I watched my compatriots engage in this rare opportunity for uncensored expression, something broke within me. I could not be the instrument of their potential punishment for simply speaking their minds. Nor could I continue living a divided life, creating art with one hand while potentially destroying artists with the other. That night, back in my hotel room, I made the decision that would alter the course of my life. I would not return to Afghanistan. I would not file the expected reports. I would not betray those who had welcomed me into their artistic community. The mechanics of my decision were frighteningly simple. As a member of the official delegation with proper documentation, I could potentially request asylum. Turkey, while not ideal for permanent settlement given its own complex politics, could be a gateway to Europe or beyond. The weight of what I was leaving behind crushed down on me as I lay sleepless. My family, particularly my uncle, who had rescued me from the front lines, my country despite its troubles, the musical connections I had formed, and the cultural revolution we had begun in Kabul's youth scene. But the alternative had become impossible. To return meant either becoming an informant against my fellow artists or facing the consequences of refusal, reassignment to combat duty at best, charges of disloyalty at worst. The next morning, I performed with our music band for what I knew would be the last time, pouring everything I had into the music, a farewell to the ensemble that had given me purpose during an impossible time. After the performance, the public loved my music and the audience asked me for more songs, but because of the limitation of time, I couldn't sing more songs because we had another group of traditional Afghan music band with famous singers, Saima Jan Tarana and Farhad Daria. They needed to perform as well. That evening, the Afghan embassy in Ankara, Turkey, invited us for a big dinner celebration at the embassy. They received us with pride and joy. The ambassador himself congratulated us with our victory in that prestigious festival. That night, I was feeling very anxious and nervous because of my final decision to leave the group and stay in Turkey. That evening, as the Afghan delegation gathered for dinner, one of the Afghan Secret Service noticed my quietness. He approached me and asked me, "Wahid, are you all right?" I gathered myself and answered him, Yes, I am okay. I just have a little sore throat. I need to see a doctor. I would like to be good for our final performance." That person from the Afghan Secret Service told me that I need to take medication to be ready for final performance. I agreed with him, and I told him that tomorrow first in the morning, I will go to see a doctor and buy some medication for my throat. The big day was coming. One of my uncle Harun Surkabi from United States of America, he made some arrangement with Kurdish Separated Group in Turkey to help me to escape from the hotel where I stayed with my Afghan delegation. That night after we came back to the hotel, the word of my sore throat spread about the group, and everyone with sympathy wished me to get better for the final performance. For me, it was about time to prepare myself mentally for leaving my musician friends, the people I truly loved and enjoyed working with. Also that night, my roommate in our hotel, Farad Daria, noticed my nervousness as well. He asked me if I'm okay. I told him that no worries, I am not feeling that good. I think I have a sore throat, and I will be seeing a doctor very soon. During that festival, I managed to meet a very nice Afghan Dr. Hashim Yurdim. He was living in Turkey for a long time. That night, our group authorities notified him to come to the hotel and help me with my sore throat. After he examined my throat, he told me that he doesn't see any inflammation, but he gave me some prescription to buy some light medication at the pharmacy. That prescription was the key for my escape from that hotel. The next morning, I wake up early and with small backpack on my shoulder and with my few important documents, I came to the lobby of the hotel. At the lobby of the hotel, I met a few Afghan Secret Service personnel. They asked me where I was going. I showed them immediately the prescription from the doctor, and I told them I'm going to nearby pharmacy to buy this medication because of my sore throat, and I need to be good for today's final show. That was the last time I saw those people in my life. I came out of the hotel, and at the front of the hotel, there was a black car that I knew from my uncle earlier that he told me about it, was waiting for me. They were there to pick me up. And as soon as I got out of the hotel, the doors of the car wide opened, and I immediately jumped inside of the car. Before I closed the door behind me, the car engine loudly started and driving me away.